Hello, my creative friends, and welcome to the very first episode of the Empowered Creatives podcast. I'm so happy you're here with me today. I really cannot probably tell you enough, relay enough how big of a grin I have on my face right now that you are listening to this episode. So thank you. Thank you for being here. I know you have 1,000,001 podcasts to choose from, so I'm glad you're here listening to this one. All right. Before I dive into this week's podcast, I wanted to give you a little heads up. Like, what is the Empowered Creatives podcast? Why this name? Why this podcast? Why now? So the Empowered Creatives podcast is, I actually have been wanting to relaunch a new podcast for a while now. For those of you who joined me about 2 years ago, I launched the Creative Journeys podcast, which was a mini project where I interviewed my friends, my creatives, the people I went to college with, the people I know in Chicago, just to learn about their creative journeys and sort of highlight how all of our creative journeys can be completely different, and they should be different. I deeply enjoyed that project, but it just didn't feel like it was the project that should be brought forward. It didn't quite align to the business that I was creating. And I found myself wanting to learn something new and make space for new things. So I put that one on the back burner, thinking maybe one day I'll relaunch it again. But when the time came, I decided I really wanted to think about, well, what's something for me? What is something as a creative myself that I not only want to share with the world, but also what something that I want to learn about? And can I go on this learning process with my audience, with you? So can I not only teach you, but also learn in the process and provide this platform so that we can all grow together? So then the question became, well, what is that thing? And for me, what I realized, I think the hardest thing about being a creative is that magical word called money. How do I make a living and live a creative life? And there's not one answer. I know when I left college, I was told, well, this is how you make a living, and that didn't quite pan out the way I thought it would. I know so many people that I've talked to, artists who I've talked to on Clubhouse or in actual conversations, who told me, they went into, those straight 9-to-5 jobs because they were told from a young age, you can't make a living as an artist, which is not true. I definitely have met artists who have. But I think the ultimate answer is there's not one way and there's not one right path for each and every one of us. Ultimately, we're all searching for this quote unquote balance. How do you pay the bills, make the life that you want, while also figuring out how your creativity and your craft live within that world as well? So hence the Empowered Creatives. So how this is going to work is every other week, on Wednesdays, I will be releasing an episode. I may at some point take a brief hiatus because I think breaks are good for all of us, but I will definitely give you a heads up if that's going to happen. But for the time being, every Wednesday, I'm going to release an episode. Those are going to alternate between solo episodes where you get to hang out with me, and I'm going to share tools, tricks, things I've learned from experience, from reading, from workshops, from classes, from coaches, and I'm going to share all of that with you, as well as guest episodes where I bring on a guest and we chit chat about their career, their craft, what they're doing in the world. First and foremost, I should probably introduce myself. Hi, everybody. I'm Victoria Hines, and I am a creative career coach. Actually, at this current point in my life, I do have a 9-to-5 job. So I work during the day for a tech company, and then I coach creatives in their careers after hours and on weekends. What that means for me is I work with two very specific types of creatives. So I often work with the creatives who are feeling lost, stuck, overwhelmed, don't know what to do next. They're feeling off in their career. Something's just not right. I work with them to basically pivot, figure out what their next step is, figure out what their right path is. I love the program and how I work with artists because nobody's answer is the same. Everybody comes to their own conclusion. But some people decide they're going to completely change industries. Some artists decide they're ready to double down and go back to their craft. Others figure out the day job that actually might support them so they can pay the bills and spend their free time making the art they want. But you can't have a day job you hate and also be creative. Those two things don't usually sustain themselves for very long. The other way that I work with artists is I help them level up. So I've worked with comedians and writers and creative business owners and graphic designers who were launching a business, who wanted to write a book, who wanted to start booking bigger and better gigs. But all of them were scared, fearful, afraid, not sure how to do it on their own. And that's where I came in. I sat down with them and I was 100% invested in where they wanted to go. And we strategized together. We came up with a plan. We figured out what had gotten in their way in the past and we forged a path forward together. And most importantly, I held them accountable to take those steps because taking action is terrifying. All right, so that's me in a nutshell. Let me also tell you the most important thing about each and every one of these episodes that I'm going to be releasing. So I am going to, at the very end of the episode, give you one thing to try. This might be a journal prompt. This might be an exercise. This might be a challenge. Whatever it is, I am going to give you one thing to try so that you can try and find that confidence in your career once again. Again, these are all going to be experiments. This might be an exercise that you take and use every day of your life. This might be something you try once and you're like, nope, Victoria, this isn't for me. And maybe a year from now, you come back to it and you're like, oh yeah, this was exactly what I needed right at this point. So that is the big takeaway that I will be dropping at the end of this episode. For our very first time together, I wanted to tell you a little bit about my story and my background and what I've learned along the way to where I am at today. For those of you who know me super well, you probably already know all these points, but I'm hoping that you can take some takeaways from my own career, get to know me a little bit better, see where I'm coming from. And again, at the very end of today, I will give you one thing to try that'll give you a little bit more confidence in your creative career. Somewhere between hustle and burnout. So me and my background, I am a theater nerd through and through. So I actually fell in love with theater back when I was in elementary school. My grandparents lived in this little town called Granbury, Texas, in Texas. And at that time, there was this call, the local theater had a really good college program. So a lot of the local students would come and perform at the Granbury Theater Opera House. So I grew up seeing every old school musical known to man I saw at that theater. Annie, Get Your Gun, Sound of Music. I mean, you name it, I probably saw it at that theater. So that's when I fell in love. I started doing performing in middle school, carried me through high school. And real quick nutshell about high school, I actually ended up with stage 5 synovial sarcoma my senior year of high school. So in the midst of applying for colleges, this big existential trying to figure out what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, I was also battling cancer and really had the rug ripped out from underneath me. At the time, the thing that lit me up, the thing that felt like it was giving me purpose, the thing that was pulling me through this really dark time was theater, was performing, was acting. So I decided to lean into that and go to college for theater. I did end up getting into a program. I have been cancer-free now for 12 plus years, if I'm doing the math right. So we're all good on that front. And long story short, I graduated college and moved to Chicago because what does every theater major get told when they graduate from school? You move to LA, you move to New York, you move to Chicago, maybe Atlanta nowadays, and you pursue your career. Not the best advice in the world. It's not very all-encompassing. Nobody tells you what sort of jobs to get to pay the bills. They're just sort of like, here you go, here's your degree, figure it out. So I moved to Chicago. I did not have a job, but I quickly started working at a restaurant. I was a bartender and server. I did babysitting. I did traveling murder mystery shows. I finally ended up at a part-time job in arts administration, working at a theater company. And then 2017 rolled around. In 2017, I was both at the same time offered a full-time arts administration job at that theater company, as well as I booked the biggest gig of my life. So I was offered an understudy role, which for those of you who are not in theater, understudy is sort of like the second stringer in football. So you're the backup in case somebody can't go on. But I was offered an understudy role at one of the biggest theaters in town. And all I could think of was like, oh my gosh, yes, I've made it. Like, this is it. All the doorways are open for me. I can pay my bills. I'm breaking down those barriers. I am an actor. And here's what happened, 2018. So the show comes and goes. I'm working full time and I get burnt out. I decide to take a break, to take a step back, because I was working probably 80-hour weeks, trying to do both of those things at the same time. And I started taking a look around me. I'd been in Chicago about 3 years by this point, and I was starting to try and craft a vision of my life. What did I want my life to look like 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road? And no matter who I looked at around me, I couldn't find somebody whose life I wanted. Career, yes. There were so many people who were doing things in their career that I was envious of, that I admired. But whose life I wanted, that was harder to find. And it was sort of a wake-up call to realize that something was out of sync for me. This was one of my first major lessons and sort of wake-up calls that we are not just our careers. Our relationships, our health, what we create all make up these larger pieces of our lives. And you can't keep putting all of these other things on the back burner in the hopes of making it in your career. Because when we say the word making it, what we really are saying, I'm chasing something. I'm chasing something that I'm hoping I'm going to get in the future. But chasing is never a good goal to set for yourself. And what I realized was I was no longer in love with the process. I was no longer in love with the day-to-day life of being an actor in that moment, at least how I was pursuing it at that moment. And I realized something needed to change. I also had been operating under this scarcity mindset for so long. I said yes to every project, thinking that a door would open. I said yes to every person who wanted me to be a part of their reading, even though half the time I didn't even like the script. Maybe the people were great, but I wasn't getting paid and I didn't like the script. And I just kept chasing and chasing and chasing because I felt like if I don't chase, if I don't say yes, then all those doors are going to close and I'm going to wind up with nothing. The reality is I was doing a lot of chasing without fully knowing what I was going after because I didn't have that vision for myself. I was trying to craft that vision in 2018 and was slowly realizing that my lack of vision had led to me doing a lot of fun projects and doing a lot of exploring, but not necessarily being strategic or structured with my time and my energy and my money. And I was honestly on a one-way ticket to burnout. Now, burnout's an interesting word. I think we've had a lot of conversations around burnout, especially in the last 2 years. I mean, the pandemic was sort of a wake-up call about burnout in the work culture. We've even experienced burnout from the pandemic. The biggest cause of burnout for me is no longer feeling challenged by what I'm doing. I need to know that the work and what I'm producing and putting out into the world is making an impact. I need to know that I'm learning, that I'm growing, that I'm doing something better each and every day. And if I'm not getting those opportunities, if I'm not seeing those doors slowly open, if I'm not having those conversations or learning those new things despite everything I'm trying to do right, then something's wrong and I'm on the wrong path. And very quickly, I'm probably going to fall into burnout. So in 2018, I started pivoting, which really just meant I was searching for what was next. I tried a lot of different things. I ended up working with this group called the Midwives here in Chicago, which was a really great community for me at that time. I remember going to them and I was like, well, I could explore fundraising and do that for a local film festival that my friend ran and started here in Chicago. So I could launch an entire sponsorship program and explore that. I could explore producing, which was something I thought I might be interested in, especially with immersive theater. I could also explore writing or being a playwright. I had all these ideas, wasn't really sure where to go. Of course, I chose the easiest one first because it felt like the thing with the least barriers to make it happen. So 2018, most of the rest of 2018, I'm doing a lot of exploring. I think I did write a play. I joined so many groups. I started networking. But before long, end of 2019 rolls around. It's been 2 years almost since I was a part of that project in 2018. And by the end of 2019, I was actually 90% sure I wanted to move into experiential producing. I loved creating experiences. It aligned with my background. I had some really good moments in my career where I had done a lot of that type of work. So that's what I wanted to do. Except if you remember what happens in 2020, a global pandemic hits. So my entire plan to pivot into an experiential marketing company so that I could pay the bills and eventually spin off to do theater in that vein blew up in smoke. So by May of 2020, I was tired. I was exhausted. I had spent over 2 years trying to pivot on my own. And I had a lot of really cool projects and things I had added to my resume, but I wasn't really going anywhere with any of it. So finally, after spending so much time and so much earning potential that I felt like I had sort of mismanaged for many, many years, I joined a coaching program. I stumbled on this essentially how to launch a business 3-month, like major epic course. And I kind of knew in my gut entrepreneurship was something I was always interested in. People had called me business savvy all throughout theater school. I knew that I just sort of got that side of it. I was interested in business books and I was like, you know what? I needed a new network. I needed a collection of people who were all trying to change with me. And I wanted to learn something new. I wanted to feel challenged again. And it ended up being one of the best moves for me. So it was through that program that I discovered coaching. I actually didn't know it was a thing. I had no idea it was a career. I had no idea it was a path. And I honestly started this program thinking I still wanted to produce and create experiences. But when I took that entrepreneurial idea of beta testing, so creating a minimal viable product that I could then test the market with, which for me, creating experiences was like, let me interview my friends and I'm going to create a bespoke experience in your home just for you. So when I started over the course of 3 weeks creating these experiences, I was exhausted. Every time I went to go sit down to create something, I just felt so much pressure to produce. And I very quickly realized, why in the world would I choose a career where I had to produce on a timeline each and every day? This isn't fun. This doesn't light me up. And worst of all, I feel drained after I do it. But the part of that process that didn't drain me, the part of it that actually lit me up, the part of it that left me more excited than when I had started, was talking to my friends, was having tough conversations about where they were at in their careers, was helping them navigate how to network, what to do next, how to pivot into a new career, how to open themselves up to what was next. Because I had just gone through it. I knew how dark and scary that place was. And being able to help them in that way, that was gold for me. My body knew what my brain didn't. It wasn't about passion in this instance, although I am very passionate about what I do now. It was more so that I was good at it. It was this combination of both. I quickly realized you cannot always trust your brain. Your brain is sometimes going to overthink things, try to figure out the logical conclusion, analyze everything to death. But you can always trust your body. Your body knows what feels good. Your body knows what energizes you. Your body is your gut. It's that sixth sense, whatever you want to call it. It knows things that your brain cannot. So here I am today. I have launched a business. So I own an LLC, which is crazy to say out loud. I'm a career coach for creative artists who are lost, stuck, and overwhelmed in their careers. I get to work with so many cool creatives across multiple different avenues and industries. I also work full-time for a tech company, so I'm figuring out how to balance that 9-to-5 life with my creative life, which my creative life right now is this podcast, is my business. I now get to make money so that I can make art, so that I can create a business, that I can vividly see now. I have a vision of what I want my life to be, of what I want my work to be, of what I want my business to be. And that feels good. Because now that I know what I want, I know that the how is going to reveal itself along the way. Now that I know what I want, I know when to say yes and I know when to say no. So why this podcast? Why now? I know so much about trying to find that sweet spot between hustle and burnout. There are 3 major resources: time, energy, and money that we are constantly trying to balance. And all of those are constantly shifting. If you don't have enough time, then something has to go on the back burner. If you don't have enough energy, then you have to find ways to re-energize yourself and let go of the things that drain you. If you don't have to have enough money, you have to pay the bills somehow. All of us are trying to balance full-time jobs with side businesses, with part-time jobs, with side gigs, with passion projects. It's all this complex matrix. Even full-time artists are still trying to find that balance between all the things that are pulling them in different directions. I'm so excited to share what I've learned from my own life with you, as well as bringing guests on the show. Because money and art are not at war with each other, although it often really does feel that way. Money is simply the object we use to trade for the things we need. And I do believe that there's a way to find a balance of making art and making money, all while keeping ourselves mentally sane. I mean, there isn't one golden success plan, I will admit that. But what I'm really, really hoping is that you find inspiration and you're able to take away one thing from each and every episode that you can experiment with, that might bring that confidence back into your life. Confidence comes from knowing what you want, knowing that you're on the right path, trusting yourself, knowing that you've stacked the odds in your favor day after day, week after week. I think when we as creatives falter is when we're no longer sure that we're on the right path. Our confidence wanes when we no longer trust ourselves, when we no longer believe that we have control and get to make decisions about our career and about our creative life. So here's the one thing that I want you to try right after this episode. want you to go ahead and close your eyes. And I want you to imagine it's a year from now, and you are on the exact same path you are today. So whatever you're doing in your creative life, whatever day job you might have, whether it's full-time, part-time, multiple part-time jobs, I want you to imagine that you're doing all of the same things a year from today. And I want you to ask yourself, how does it feel? What feels good? What feels right? And what feels like it's pulling you out of balance? What doesn't fit in your future? All right. With that being said, thank you so much for joining me today. Before you hop off, the best way that you can show support and love for this podcast is to subscribe, rate, and review. I know, super cliche, but if you are able to, please hit that subscribe button, leave a rating, and also pretty please write some words and drop a review. I can't wait to introduce you to next week's episode with a guest. But with that being said, stay creative, my friends.